Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dorie Clark, and I am here with incredible executive coaches. First, I'd like to introduce to you Alisa Cohn. Alisa Cohn is the #1 coach for startups in the world. She is a contributor to Worth, to Inc., and to Forbes, and is a great friend. And I'm also here with Marshall Goldsmith, the legendary executive coach, really the founder of the modern day practice of executive coaching, considered the #1 executive coach, #1 thought leader in executive coaching in the world, author of bestsellers, including What Got You Here Won't Get You There, and Mojo and Triggers. And Alisa.
And Marshall and I are both honored to be here with you, Dorie Clark, the #1 communications coach in the world and 3-time author, most recently Entrepreneurial You, and also a teacher at Fuqua School of Business as well as other organizations.
Well, Thank you so much. That's great. So everyone, we are here today with this webinar, The New Coach. And we wanted to do this. Alisa and I are part of Marshall's MG 100, the 100 Coaches Project, which is an initiative that's focused on giving back to others. And one of the things that we realized is that for many people, something that doesn't get talked about enough is how do you build a successful coaching practice? How do you do the business of it so that you can thrive well enough to be able to help more people? So we are eager to take your questions. If you have questions, again, please feel free to type them into the chat box. We'll be going through them. But I wanted to get started and elicit the wonderful expertise of Alisa and Marshall, and I'll be chiming in too, so we can get started with some of the questions that have come in previously. So the first one to get started with, and Alisa, maybe we can start with you and then go to Marshall, actually comes from Jeff. And Jeff wanted to know, how can you best establish credibility with people who don't already know you? If they don't know you, if you haven't been directly referred, how do you seem credible? Alisa, what would you say?
Well, thanks, Dorie, and thanks for you for your vision in kind of conducting this webinar for us together. So Jeff, the way to think about that is to go back to people who you already know. They're going to help you understand both what is great about you so that you can establish the credibility by knowing that, but also getting their referrals and testimonials and references helps you build that credibility even before you've begun your coaching practice. Using other people is a great way to build credibility.
Wonderful. Marshall, what would you contribute to that?
Well, the way I got started into business and leadership development is I met a very famous man, Dr. Paul Hersey, and he got double booked and said, "Can you do what I do?" I said, "I don't know, man." Been hanging around with him. He said, "I'll pay $1,000 for a day." I was making $15,000 a year, so I said, "I'll give it a shot here." And I did this program for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. It's very, very successful, and they were angry when I showed up, but happy when I left. Said, "Send Marshall again." So Paul says, "Well, why don't you go work with me?" I said, "Paul, how can I sell anything? I have no credibility. I'm not famous like you are." And Paul said, "Use the word we." We. And, we was 99% Paul Hersey and, 1% me, if that, but it worked. And my first book I did was Friends of Cecil Mine, Peter Drucker, Richard Beckard, and me. Well, who was I? I was basically nobody, but after 6 books with them, I became kind of one of them. So I'd say, hang around with some great people, and people obviously want you to do this. And then to the degree you can, be a partner. Use that word we.
That's great. Thank you, Marshall. And Jeff, I'll just add one other thing. A concept that I talk about a lot, especially in my Recognized Expert course, is social proof. And specifically, this is a term borrowed from psychology, but it really means what is the credibility that you are telegraphing in the marketplace? And a kind of shortcut way that I recommend people think about it is, what are the brands that people have already heard of that you can affiliate yourself with? So for instance, you can get it through clients that you've worked with, through institutions that you've taught for or attended, publications that you've been featured in or write for. So you can be thinking, oh, well, if I have a marquee client, or if I can work to get one, if I can work hard to break into a brand name publication, those are things that can help your reputation speak for you.
Yep. Awesome.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. So a second question came in from Denise. And Marshall, I'd like to start with you, if you don't mind. She wants to know, how can coaches remain humble while marketing their services? I know this is sort of a challenge for a lot of people. They feel like maybe I need to somehow brag about myself, but in order to market effectively. But how do I strike that balance?
Well, the majority of coaches are women. And Sally Hawkes and I wrote a book together called How Women Rise. She's the lead author. And how are women different than men? And one of the issues with women is typically a problem with what is called self-promotion. Women tend to have this misguided belief that my good work should, quote, speak for itself, as if God is going to fly out of the sky and recognize your good work. Well, if that were true, no company would need a marketing function. And actually, in a way, if you look at the concept of ego, people say that's being ego-less. I would challenge that. It means actually being egotistical. Because when you have that view, I shouldn't have to promote myself, I shouldn't have to market myself. What you're really saying is I'm so good that I'm above all that stuff. Well, I'm certainly not above it. And I think it's very important to realize every good company has a marketing function. And you are your own marketing function, and get over that shame and guilt crap and sit there and say, you know, if I believe in the product, don't be afraid to promote it.
Yeah. Absolutely. Can I follow up on that?
Do it, Alisa.
Thanks, Dorie. Yes, Marshall, fantastic. And also, if you believe in the product, I know that there are every coach out there listening to this webinar, and every coach out there who wants to build a practice has a lot to offer people. So what I tell my clients about this all the time is it's stingy of you to keep it to yourself. It's stingy of you to not offer your services and your signature presence to the world. And so you don't want to think about marketing yourself. You want to think about the valuable offering you're able to contribute. When you focus on that, it's not about self-promotion. It's about attracting the right people.
That's good.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you. And one other piece, Denise, that I'll just add to that as well is that it's so important to have a wingman supporting you. It is considered a little bit over the top. Not what I would recommend for people to say, "Oh, I'm the greatest. I'm the best." I mean, that comes across as bragging. But if you have good friends and colleagues that say, Alisa is the best, Marshall is the greatest, people will listen, they will take it seriously, and then you are able to do it for them as well. It's sort of a rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, one other thing, if you can't get a wing man, get wing women to help you out.
That's right. Absolutely. Equal opportunity here.
Always.
Love it. So another question came in from Kayla, and she was wondering, she said, I'm still grappling with the fear of going out on my own as a coach. And so I'll actually start with this, if that's all right. And maybe we'll go to you next, Alisa. But Kayla, I think this is not an irrational fear. I mean, it is difficult sometimes to get the wheels turning and be able to start earning revenue. And so one thing that I actually advise people is it is not a bad idea at all. I actually recommend that if you are interested in becoming a coach, that you start doing it nights and weekends while you are working in a full-time job. Because first of all, it enables you to test it, to see if you like it, to work out the kinks, to get experience, to get testimonials. And then whenever you do decide, if you decide to do it full-time, you should be doing it at the point where you have enough actual paying clients that you are able to replace a good percentage of your income. Otherwise, it becomes a little bit more, I'm just going to jump off a cliff and hope it works. And no wonder you have apprehensions about that. That's
terrifying.
That's pretty terrifying. So work to build it up on a side, and then you can transition more gently into full-time coaching. Alisa?
Dorie, that's very powerful. The notion of little steps get you there. What I advise my clients, and I write a lot about, is really a personal mastery. The notion of really understanding what your fear is and knowing that it's irrational beliefs that are coming up for you. Your shame and your concern and your imposter syndrome, we all have that. What's very helpful is to find ways to challenge those irrational thoughts. Find people who are your best cheerleaders and find out what you bring to the table and write those things down to counteract your irrational fear. So what Dorie pointed out is some of your fear is rational, little steps will help that, but your internal confidence you need to build by using the right kind of self-talk and mindset, and that's going to really help propel you forward.
One suggestion I would have, if you do have a full-time job now, it may not be possible, but it may. That is to try to get a bridge contract. So what that means is I'm working full-time for this large company. I want to go off and be a coach. If I could get a maybe 2 to 3 year part-time contract with the company, that really helps ease that transition. So again, may not be possible. On the other hand, we're just giving you ideas. So maybe it would be.
Yeah, you never know if you don't ask.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marshall. So we had another great question that came in, and this one is from Dennis. And Dennis wanted to know, he says, I often will meet managers who want to bring me in, but they're not the decision maker, and they don't seem willing to go to the decision maker and argue for me. How can I sort of break through this this struggle that I keep encountering? Yeah, so it's a tricky question.
What do you think?
Yeah, so for me, Dennis, I think if we're talking about how do you break through to decision makers, it's hard, obviously, if in your own network you're not already connected to CEOs or high-level people. And so in many cases, I think it's sort of an upstream problem. It's, well, how do you get connected to those right kind of people?
Yeah.
And so something that I am a strong advocate for is working to build your platform. Because the more content that you are creating, the more you are able to get noticed by the right people and be seen as a peer at the high level.
Yeah.
You know, you're never going to network your way to a CEO if the person that you happen to know is, a mid-tier manager. It's just too many hurdles. But if you can begin a campaign to start writing for high-profile publications such that you're in the Harvard Business Review or you're in Forbes or the things that CEOs and high-level people are reading, and they begin to say, oh, I keep seeing this guy's name everywhere. His ideas are great. Let's bring him in. That changes the power dynamic. It's not you knocking on their door. It's them saying, let's bring in Dennis.
Yep, that's fantastic. And I would add that, I built my practice starting 18 years ago by putting one foot in front of the other. So I definitely encountered those challenges when I started out. And actually, I think of this as an opportunity to begin the coaching process. When I talk with a new client back in those days, certainly it was about what is the process from here? And then we could talk about the process. Very often, they themselves don't know what the process is. They haven't really thought it through. So what's the process from here? And then also helping them and coaching them in the moment, but how they're going to bring the discussion to the decision maker and how they're going to have that conversation. You both provide value, and you also are more likely to get into the coaching framework in that way.
Good. I love it. Marshall, any other thoughts?
No, that sounds
all
great.
right. Very good. Thanks. So Raphael wrote in with a question, and we touched on this a little bit, but I think it's worth probing because it often gets talked about. What are your thoughts about doing free or discounted work when you are getting started? Marshall, do you have opinions about that?
I do a ton of free work now. I don't think I'm getting started, but I do a ton of free work. Number one, it's a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked with the CEO of the Red Cross, the Girl Scouts, the New York Public Library, on and on and on.
So I'm noticing these are all nonprofits. Is that a common denominator for you?
Also in the Army and the Navy, people like that. And yeah, I do a lot of free work. I think it's great for a variety of reasons. One, it's good to do good deeds.
That's right.
Two, they often have boards. And their boards are often very important people. And I have dinner with my clients all the time. And it's really nice to have dinner with people who are different. Like the head of the New York Public Library is interesting as opposed to just another corporate CEO, or the head of the Red Cross, or our friend Francis Hesselbein, who's head of the Girl Scouts. So I'm a big fan of that idea.
Great. I would add that when you're just getting started, a great way to think about getting your first few clients is to being offered to doing free work. What you get from that is experience to counteract that fear we were talking about before. Also, it gives you something to write about. To Dorie's point about writing content, you've got to create content to help build your platform. And also, most importantly, get you testimonials and references to continue to build your social proof. Ultimately, it's going to be the ladder that you're going to be able to build on.
Yeah, that's terrific. And I'll also say to this question, Raphael, that I think that in many cases, free work is better than discounted work. Because from a branding perspective, if you are giving it as a gift, people are often very grateful, very appreciative. If you are discounting it, even I mean, that's a gift as well. But oftentimes people will say, well, maybe he really is only worth $30 an hour. And they get these sort of weird ideas. So I think it's often better from a branding perspective to be either expensive or free and not somewhere in between.
Yeah, I have one other suggestion if you do volunteer work. I've done a ton of volunteer work. And what I found is you really have to reinforce you are doing volunteer work.
Yeah.
Because what happens is, actually I've had this happen before. I worked in a very large volunteer organization. Somebody comes up to me and says, how much are we paying you to do this? I'm sitting there, you're not paying me anything to do this. Well, the reality is it's a compliment to the company. And people need to know you're a volunteer. Because if they don't, then sometimes they actually get angry because you seem threatening to them. And I'm in a nonprofit, I'm not getting paid much. Why are we paying this other coach to be here?
Yeah.
Well, make sure that the people know if you are a volunteer, that you are one, and also do not assume, that was a mistake I made. Do not assume that they automatically know that, because sometimes they don't.
Right.
Yeah, such an important point, Marshall. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great. So another great question I think came in from Lucia, and she wondered about the value of taking on a specific niche. She said she's a lawyer. Should she just work with other lawyers to start? She's been told that if you start in a niche, it's easier to establish yourself. What's your take? Alisa, how would you tackle that?
Well, to be honest with you, if you're a lawyer, then I think you have fantastic access to lawyers, formal lawyers, right, in that whole space. So I'm not sure if I would think about, the value of when you're first starting out, the value of deciding on a niche so early. It's more like the obvious niche is the one you can start getting work in and beginning building your platform and your profile from there.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Marshall, do you have a pro or con take on the niche question?
I have a niche. I only work with highly successful people and help them achieve positive long-term change in behavior. So a very narrow niche.
Love it.
I don't have an industry niche, but I have a client niche.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of different ways that you can think about it. If you do want to have a niche, I mean, it could be industry specific. It could be regional. I'm the #1 coach in Des Moines, or it could be you coach expats, or whatever your thing is. There's different ways to think about it.
Right.
But I think early on, there's some people, if a niche appeals to you and it presents itself readily, by all means, it is easier to establish yourself in it. Sometimes for Renaissance people, it can be a little hard to pin it down and choose. I know I had that experience. And so it's not required. You don't have to shoehorn yourself into something if it doesn't feel right. But if you're comfortable with it, then yes, it often is easier because you know how to reach those clients. You look like you had something else to say.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, I think it's kind of good to have a niche. I have a very narrow niche. So I got a call from this one company that said, we got this second line supervisor. We love this guy. And would you ever work with a second line supervisor? I said, well, I haven't done that for years. I said, we love this guy. I said, would you like to do it? I said, I don't know. Here's what it costs. They said, love's a strong word. We just like him. Yeah, we don't love him that much.
That's right. Draw your line in the sand.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Yes. So another question actually came in. This one is from Prativa, but it actually came in from several people. So I think it's on people's minds. They wanted to know about certification. Is certification a must when it comes to coaching, or how do you think about that? So you sound like you have some thoughts, Alisa.
Well, I think it's a complicated question. I am, in my past life, a recovering CPA, so I know a lot about certification. I guess the way I think about that is that training and expertise and lifelong learning, including a lot of self-learning, which is a lot of what I do and what all of us do here. Reading, keeping yourself up to speed, talking with colleagues. We're so fortunate to be able to be part of the Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches, to learn from our whole community. Those are all important things. And then I would add that one time in my life has anyone asked me for about certification. I just don't think, it has not been that important to me. That may be different in Europe and other countries. In the US, especially in the niche that I work in, which is startups, it's just not really relevant. But I want to emphasize, it's really important to have your own lifelong learning program.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. Marshall, do you have a
take? I think it just depends. I mean, I'm not certified by anyone, so I don't know. But I think it just depends, because if you haven't written a bunch of books and you don't have some established credibility otherwise, I don't see a downside. So I'd say, yeah, it's probably a good idea if that is the situation. If you're at a certain point where there's really not much need for it or demand for it, then don't worry about it. On the other hand, why not?
Mm.
If it helped build your credibility, it doesn't hurt anything. So
You don't get dumber.
yeah, you don't. I have a good phrase. I won't learn less.
That's right.
Yeah.
And to the specifics of your question, Prativa, you were wondering, is a coaching certification a must? I wouldn't say it's a must, but I agree with Marshall. I mean, many, obviously you want to do your homework, see what other people think about it from different programs, but many coaching certification programs are great in terms of professional development and just giving you new skills, new tools that you can use.
Yeah.
But the asterisk on that is that ultimately what matters when it comes to the metric of getting business is what matters to your prospective client.
Exactly.
And so many prospective clients honestly have never heard of the coaching certifications. They can't tell the difference. They don't know. It may be a great thing for you, but ultimately you should be asking yourself, what's going to be meaningful to the people who are hiring me?
And sometimes they do care. And that's fine too.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
But other metrics can be: have you written books? Do you have a lot of experience in the industry? Are there other ways that they can tell that you know what you're doing?
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So a question that came in that I thought was quite interesting comes from Jeannie. And Jeannie wanted to know, for all of you guys here, what, in your opinion, has caused spikes in your business growth? Are there certain events or circumstances that you can point to that have demonstrably propelled you forward? Any kind of turning points? So
I think Marshall has a good story about turning point in his career.
Which one?
The New Yorker article.
Oh, yeah.
That's what brought Marshall and Alisa together.
That's right. That's what brought us together.
The New Yorker magazine wrote the story of my life. That was a very positive thing. And then my friend Mark Ryder, who was here today, we're doing our fourth book together. That's how I met him. So I have to say I owe a lot to New Yorker magazine.
Now, Marshall, how did the New Yorker actually discover you? How did they come
Well,
to
there
write
was
that?
almost nothing ever heard of about executive coaching before. This was 2002.
Yeah.
Actually, there's very little executive coaching in 2002.
That's right.
It was a pretty new field.
It was.
And so this woman, Larissa on Farquhar, said, what is this executive coaching thing?
Yeah.
So she's kind of scurrying around trying to find someone. First person she looked up was David Allen. I love David Allen. He's one of our 100 coaches. But she said, getting organized, that's sort of boring. So she looked around at this guy, Marshall Goldsmith. He's a Buddhist, kind of weird, So I think it'd be a much more fun story to have him. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah.
Amazing. So one answer is getting written or getting written about, getting featured in a major publication can be a turning point in terms of being perceived as a recognized expert. Alisa, have you had that experience?
Well, I'd like to say on the one hand, I think it's really true. An overnight success is 10 years in the making. It's like one foot in front of the other every day, being out there every day and doing your best every day and recovering from setback every day. So that's been the story of my career for sure. And at the same time, thanks to the inspiration of both of you, especially you, Dorie, who helped me think about writing for high-profile publications, was enormously productive for me. And I would say that once I started writing for Inc. and for Forbes, and then I was featured and published in other publications, I began to get the snowball effect, right? An accumulation, an upward spiral of a lot of interest and a lot of more high-profile clients, which then propel me into other high-profile clients. So it's both the daily grind and also, I think, these spikes.
Yeah, I think that's right. And just to chime in with my own experience, Jeannie, something that made a big difference for me early on was, and I had to work really hard to break in, but starting to write for the Harvard Business Review, which I did in 2010, was a really big deal. The second piece that I ever wrote for them began to get a little bit of traction, and they reached out to me and asked if I would be interested in expanding the blog post into an article for Harvard Business Review magazine, which I did. And when it came out, literally that week, 3 different literary agents reached out to me and said, oh, hey, have you thought about turning this into a book? So that was the first time that I had gotten that much interest coming at me. And I thought, okay, this is great. This is a breakthrough moment. And then when that book actually came out, my first book, Reinventing You, that became a turning point for me, especially in terms of being able to convert it into paid speaking engagements. Because a book is often really helpful in that.
Yeah.
So great question there. Let's take a couple more, and then let's transfer to the live questions from you guys. And thanks, I see a bunch of them have come in, so we appreciate that.
Yeah.
So a question that has come in from Kevin, he wants to know, can you talk about pros and cons of different different ways of packaging your coaching. For instance, individual coaching versus group coaching, or in-person versus remote. How do you see that working? And in terms of building your business, is there one thing that's better to do than others? Yeah.
Well, I'll just throw out there, I think the key word here is experimentation. Thinking about sort of trying different models, both in terms of individual coaching and then team coaching. Also, what I think is an opportunity when you work with an individual in a company, you could think about the opportunities there to then work with that person's team, or then work with that person's sort of colleagues around. So I think that then you could think about packaging things as not just one person, but 4 people, or not just one person, but 4 people plus also offsites. So I think it's about building things together, experimenting. The one thing that I would say is that I don't tend to make a distinction between either calls or videos versus in person. And I don't recommend that, because actually all the research on coaching has anyway proven that it's just as effective in person as it is on video or on the phone.
Very nice. And Kevin, very useful question here. One thing that I've experienced in my own business, it's certainly different if you're starting within a company, because then it's sort of self-evident how you can expand it out. But if you are doing B2C coaching, if you're coaching, individuals directly, one thing that I've realized is that, sometimes people, when they're first getting started, say, oh, wouldn't it be great to bring a group together, but they don't really have an audience yet. And so it's like, well, how are you going to get those 10 people?
Yeah.
And so that can be really tricky, and you end up killing yourself trying to beat the bushes and get these people. So oftentimes, if you're literally just starting, it can be easier to work with individuals one-on-one. And then over time, you're able to build up enough of a base so that maybe some of those people or their referrals can become a group. But, group coaching is very efficient. It's a great way of learning. It's very effective, but not if you can't fill the group. Right. And so that's the key there. Yes. Marshall, anything else to add there?
No, that's great.
Okay, wonderful.
Good.
Well, guys, why don't we switch now to our live questions in the chat? So I'm just going to lean in here and open up the chat box. There are so many. This is amazing.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, one technical question that I can answer right away that came in from Agatha. She wants to know, will this recording be shared? The answer, Agatha, is yes, it will be. You'll be receiving the recording afterwards, so fear not.
By the way, you can send it to all your friends and share it with the whole world.
Feel free.
Yeah,
we're here to add value.
Disseminate away, absolutely. So Michelle had a question that I think is really useful. It's on a lot of people's minds, and that is, how often do you use social media? What is the role of social media in building your practice? Marshall, how do you think about that?
I have 1.3 million followers on LinkedIn, so I'm kind of big on social media. And to me, it's really not to build my practice. It's to reach people.
Yeah.
I mean, you can say, social media has lots of drawbacks. My new book, I'm going to talk about some of the positives and negatives of social media, but it's just a great way to reach people. My 100 coach idea, basically, I went to this program by our friend Aisha Brissell put on. She said, who are your heroes? My heroes were very kind and generous people like Paul Hersey and Peter Drucker and Francis Hesselbein. And she said, why don't you be more like them? And I said, that's a nice idea. I'm going to give away everything I know to 15 people. When they get old, they can do the same thing. So I made a little selfie video and put it on LinkedIn. I thought maybe 100 people would apply. Turned out to be the most widely viewed video ever on LinkedIn. 18,000 people applied, which really led to this whole project, which means I get to work with wonderful people like these two. So for me, social media is a great opportunity. Now, again, I'm really not an expert outside of LinkedIn. The others I use, but I don't know as much as I would like to. LinkedIn, though, I know a lot about. And for me, it's been very, very positive.
So if you had to have one tip, Marshall, for somebody kind of just starting out, they don't have a big following at all, what do you think they should do or lean in on? Here's
the hard part: get started. It's easy to just say, well, look at that guy, he's got 1.3 million followers. Easy for him. Well, I didn't have it when I began. That's right. I began with 1 follower. Right? So you kind of got to build it up, and you're not going to get started any younger. So bottom line is, you either make a decision: I'm going to do it or not. If you're going to do it, just bite the bullet and crank it out every week, and realize that there are going to be very few people and very little return for the first several weeks. As Alisa said, one step at a time.
Possibly for several years.
Yeah. Several years. Yeah. And on the other hand, I get started younger. Just go for it.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Well, I'll chime in here. When it comes to social media, I do think actually that, I mean, it is important. It's also important to balance it out, because social media is one of these activities where I think oftentimes people can con themselves into thinking, I'm doing work by spending hours and hours on social media. Oh, I'm building my brand. I'm connecting with people. And I mean, yes, you are. It's better than like watching a cat video, but it's very different than actually calling a prospect. It's very different than actually having a meeting with someone that might turn into a real client. And so we can delude ourselves sometimes.
I never heard it. Never watching a cat video. I love it. A low bar. Better than that cat video.
Yes. So I would say it is important to have a presence. We can't be on all of them. There's way too many now. So thinking through your niche. I mean, in Marshall's case, it's LinkedIn. For many of us, if you're an executive coach, LinkedIn is really where to be. If you're doing more work with individuals, more life coaching, it's probably Facebook or something like that. But know where your audience is and emphasize there. And I'll just say the last part is that for many people, they do the kind of easy thing, the low-hanging fruit of like, oh, I'll just retweet this or I'll share a picture or something. That's fine. But what is better is actually sharing thoughtful content that demonstrates your expertise. Taking the time to write something, write a post, write an article and share it. That is what enables people to say, oh, this is unique. I like the way she thinks. I want to work with her. Alisa?
You know, the only thing I want to add, I mean, you two are experts in this. The only thing I want to add is that I personally have been able to connect with people who are really significant and meaningful, in some cases high profile, by following what they're doing on Twitter or on LinkedIn or even on Facebook and tailoring really content just to them and beginning to get into a relationship and a dialogue with them just on those channels. I would say definitely, to your point, don't spend all your time on that, but a targeted, a targeted approach to some high profile individuals can be very helpful.
Yes,
okay, we're taking a little break here.
Very good. Yes, yes.
There is fixes his phone. This is live theater.
Important phone update here. That's great. That's great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So wonderful. Here we go. So just scrolling through some of these wonderful questions that have come in. So Stacy has one that I think is really valuable for all of us. She wants to know
Stacy.
Yeah. Hi, Stacy. What best practices do you recommend for balancing your time? So how do you spend your time actually coaching versus your time building your business, your marketing, your logistics, etc.? How do you break that up? How do you know what the right balance is?
Yeah.
Marshall, how do you think about that?
You know, I don't know. I just do stuff. And I think the key is to enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you enjoy what you're doing, and you spend all the time you want. And if you don't enjoy what you're doing, it's painful.
Yeah.
So my only advice is not really a good answer to the question, but to the degree you love what you're doing, leading a well-balanced life has, to me, not really ever been much of a question. I'm 70 years old. I quote, work all the time, but I don't consider it work because I just have fun. What am I going to do? Play crappy golf with old men at the country club, eat chicken sandwiches while discussing gallbladder surgery. So
it's much better to have dinner with David Channing.
That's right.
Much
and
better.
Hang out with us.
And hang out with you, and also not watching cat videos. Okay, it's your turn.
All right, Alisa.
Well, Stacy, it's a great question. The reason it's a great question is because it acknowledges that you have to balance your client service with your marketing. So it's sort of all these pieces about working on the business, not just in the business. So I would just say a rule of thumb is to think about allocating time for marketing and networking. And really that's about scheduling, whether it's 30% or 50% isn't what's important. What's important is recognize you have to allocate that time and doing useful activities, not cat videos and not Facebook, but also not even random networking events, right? Useful, meaningful activities in that time. And then, by the way, part of that time, in my opinion, is like carving out what are the right areas for me to be networking or writing content or doing those things that help market my business.
Yeah.
So discipline.
Yeah, that's very good, Alisa. I think another piece, Stacy, that's worth mentioning, I like to talk about sort of the life cycle of your business as a coach. And in the early days, I believe that it is most important to focus on what I call sales activities, like meaning the actual kind of hand-to-hand combat. How do you bring in clients? How do you get money in the door? Because otherwise it's not going to fly. So it needs to be either directly, meeting with clients, asking for business, doing these important things. That's going to be a lot of what you do early on. But a mistake that many coaches make is once they get successful at that, they keep doing it. And the problem is that they never begin to reallocate a portion of it to what I call marketing activities, which is developing the long-term brand.
Right.
Yeah. So over time, you want to start doing more and more marketing. Marketing is not going to, and that's, writing articles, it's giving speeches, it's things like that. It's never going to get you a client tomorrow, but it will get you a much bigger and much better client 2 years or 3 years or 5 years down the line.
Right. Peter Drucker said, effective marketing eliminates the need for sales.
Yeah, it's right
I
on.
can speak for myself. I'm not really very good at sales. I don't like sales, yet I'm very good at marketing.
Yeah.
So I really don't have to sell.
Yeah, so true. That's great. So a question that Julia had, which I think probably a lot of people have grappled with, she's an executive coach. She says executive coaching looks very different across different companies. So how do you think about pitching executive coaching services? Because sometimes you're pitching to HR people, sometimes it's learning and development, sometimes it might be people who are actually heading up different units. How do you even think about knowing who the right person is, or how do you break in? I know you've done a lot of this, Alisa.
Yeah, and what I have discovered is it's really not about pitching, right? It's about building and identifying the right relationships who are high enough in the organization to be decision makers. So it's really about networking your way there. And as you are networking your way there, you will discover inevitably who are the decision makers. Is it an L&D? Is it an HR? A lot of companies I work in, especially these days, the CEO meets me, the CEO wants to work with me, and the CEO then sends me over to HR or L&D or whoever to organize the paperwork. And that's the position you want to be in, where the executive, him or herself, is bringing you in. So thinking about how you build reputation in that way, and in the meantime, navigating by virtue of making a positive impression so people continue to want to sort of refer you along inside of the company. One thing I want to say is that patience is required for large public companies if you want to navigate in that way. So recognize you have to have a lot of patience and a lot of follow-up and persistence. That's not bad, right? Consider that to be, again, a way to make sure that they don't miss out on hiring you. That's the way I think about it.
Yeah. One question I get from young coaches a lot, since I have a PhD, is should I get a PhD? And me, a lot of that is just how old are you? Getting a PhD is an exercise in humility. As much, and it takes 5 years for a good school. If you can get into a good school and you're willing to put up with it and you're young, when I say young, I mean recent college graduate young, because if you're 21 years old, you're probably not going to get much coaching business anyway. So if you're 22 years old, 25 years old, 28, young, I would say it could be fun and you enjoy it, do it. Realize it is very, very hard. It takes a long time. On the other hand, you have it the rest of your life. On the other hand, if you're 35, I would say very dubious, because I don't think it's necessary for the job, number one. And number two, it is just a painful process.
Yeah, great point, Marshall. And in fact, even if your goal is teaching, it's not always necessary. I started out my career actually getting turned down by the doctoral programs that I applied to, all of them. So I have a master's, I don't have a doctorate. And nonetheless, one of the great satisfactions of my professional life is that regardless of not having a PhD, I teach regularly. I've taught for the past 6 years for the Fuqua School of Business at Duke and for business schools on actually 4 different continents. So I do a lot of work with Skolkovo in Russia. I've taught for IE in Spain, for HEC in France. So it's really not necessary if you build up your credibility in other ways. So excellent point on that. So another question that came in from Jenna is she wants to know tips on growing your brand through writing and getting your work published with prestigious online outlets. How do you make connections and inroads with editors and current contributors? So,
gosh, Dorie, that sounds like a question maybe for you.
I can tackle it, Jenna. Yes, I actually offer an online course about this called Writing for High Profile Publications. So I have a lot to say about it. Certainly, this is a really valuable activity when it comes to developing your own credibility and your own social proof. It's a strategy that I've used over the past decade. I have written more than 190 articles for the Harvard Business Review. I've done more than 250 for Forbes. And it has brought in a huge percentage of my business because people find me that way and come seek me out. So what I would say as a few initial tips for you in getting started, number one, the most important thing is making sure that you familiarize yourself with the editorial voice of that publication. If you want to break in somewhere, read it religiously, and don't just read it like, oh, that's a good article. Break it down and understand what the authors are doing. How many words are the piece? What are the topics that they're writing about or not writing about? How do they formulate the headlines? You know, is it kind of a teaser headline like "You'll never believe what so and so did," or is it a list? Is it 5 ways to be a better leader? Or is it somehow like Harvard Business Review, for instance, often likes a formulation of like what to do when. So it's kind of like a tip. What to do when your colleague does blah blah. That's a way that they often do it. So really, a deep familiarization with your target publication is key. And in terms of breaking in, of course, like most things, one of the best things that you can do is cultivate a warm lead. So understand who in your network, LinkedIn is very good for this, or Facebook, because people post things, who in your network writes for these publications, and reach out to them, ask them for their tips. If you're really close, you can say like, hey, Alisa, will you introduce me to your editor? But if you're not that close, that can be a little bit of an imposition sometimes, but you can always say, hey, Alisa, I want to write for such and such publication. I know you do. Can you give me advice? And then see where she takes it. So those are a couple of quick thoughts off the top of my head. Alisa and Marshall?
I'd like to just add to that, because Dorie, that's very astute advice. And really, I learned everything I know from Dorie Clark on this topic. And just to say that I started writing for my own blog. And right now, these days, we have so many opportunities to write for your own blog or LinkedIn or Medium to post. Now, the reason you want to do that is not because that's high profile. It's not. However, it gives you clicks. It gives you something to show other people. It also, frankly, it helps you learn. And also, as you promulgate that to other people, they begin to notice you. They might invite you to write for their publication. I know when I started writing for my own blog and then I started writing for LinkedIn, that gave me enough credibility that when I met the publisher of Worth at an event, I summoned up my courage and I said, I'd like to be able to write for Worth. And wouldn't you know it, they had an opportunity because specifically they were looking for their leadership curriculum. So it's opportunity in terms of being willing to ask, but also I had something to show them so they knew about my writing.
Yeah, that's right on. And in fact, that reminds me, Alisa, it's opportunity, plus preparation.
Yes.
A woman named Nahia, who took my writing for high profile publications course, actually wrote me a few weeks ago with a story. She said that she had been taking the course and listening to it on her commute every day. And she went to an event and she met someone who was a staffer at the World Economic Forum.
Whoa.
And because she was ready,
in her ear.
She said, she never would have been ready before, but it was in her head, like writing for high profile publications. Yeah. She talked to this person. She said, how can I write for your blog? And she actually, the post went up.
That's
she
amazing.
was able to write this post for the World Economic Forum blog about, I think it was about some aspect of artificial intelligence. Super cool.
Yeah.
But it's so important to be ready when that moment strikes.
Yeah, can I just add something to that? Because one of these questions on here is also like top tips. And one of these top tips is like, go for it, right? Put yourself in position, be willing to ask when you need to, and ready yourself every day to kind of get over your own obstacles and internal bad talk and make it into good talk.
That's great.
Yeah.
Anything else you wanted to add, Marshall?
I think it's great.
All right, amazing. So Julie had a question. She is just getting started. I mean, this is one we all face. She says, I'm just starting my practice. How do I differentiate myself when there are already so many executive coaches out there? What do you think of that? Marshall, how did you differentiate yourself, and what would you advise someone who is just breaking in today?
Well, I mean, I only get paid for results, and a lot of people ask me about that, and it takes a certain amount of nerve. But I've always done that. I'm only paid for results, and that's sort of a differentiator.
Totally.
Not
Very
too many
powerful.
people do that.
Yeah.
So that's one way I differentiated myself.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so a totally different value proposition.
Yeah.
Alyssa, how do you think about differentiation?
Well, I don't think about the other coaches out there. I really don't. I think about building my practice, building my content, and then building my relationships specifically with the right people. And then, if you call it differentiation, what I tend to do is I say, I'm going to add value in 20 minutes. So we sit down and have an initial discussion. I want to add value in 20 minutes, and that is very practical. So then they want to work with me. So I'm not thinking about all the other coaches out there. I'm just thinking about how can I add value to you right here and right now.
Yeah, that's terrific. Thank you very much, Alisa. And so another question that came in here, and was there a particular question you were drawn to, Marshall?
No, I say hi to Bill and Raphael. It's a couple of friends of mine.
Yeah, hi guys.
Questions coming in. That's right.
Yeah.
That's great. Excellent. So Kate had a question that I think is interesting and probably on some people's minds. She wants to know, do you recommend cold calling? And is cold calling ever helpful? Does that work? And my quick answer is no, I don't think it's a good idea at all. I mean, could it work? I mean, I guess it could. I mean, there's a lot of things that could work, but it is going to be a heck of a lot of effort because essentially you are just reaching out to people who don't know you, may not even really be looking for a coach, knock, knock, knock. And so it puts you in a really defensive position of like having to prove yourself. And a key part of my philosophy is always you want to turn the table such that you don't have to prove yourself. Right. You want to get people to seek you out. That's the goal.
That's the goal.
Yeah. How do you think about that, Marshall?
I've never done it before.
Yeah. So it's okay. No on cold calling. Alisa?
Well, I'm not saying no. I'm just saying I've never done it.
So,
I might say I don't know. I've never done it before.
I guess I want to say two things. If you're asking the question, I suspect you're not that inclined to cold call. And so it might be kind of miserable and it might not be the best use of your time and energy. That said, I have a colleague I knew back in Boston. She built her entire practice with cold calling. She loved it. I also met somebody who did the Sanders sales process, and he loved cold calling. So if you love cold calling, do it. Fantastic. Otherwise, there are easier ways with less energy and more reward to build your practice.
I like Jenny. Jenny says she likes my niche. Go for it, Jenny. Go for it.
That's right.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Fantastic. Great. So SP writes in with a question. SP wants to know, how do I get my initial beta clients? The people that I might coach for free. Like, where do you find them? And then how do you actually get them to agree to give you a testimonial? What does that process look like in practice? Alisa, how do you do it?
Well, when you're offering your services to individuals for free, there is a target-rich environment out there. So my advice is to ask your colleagues and friends who would be great people to coach. So don't forget, you want to get results. You want to have people who you enjoy working with and people who are likely to refer you. You tell your friends and colleagues that. That's who you're looking for. The second thing is that when you set up the engagement, it's free. It's delineated, so it's 5 sessions or 8 sessions or some number like that. And it's also the exchanges. After this, I'm going to ask you for a reference or a testimonial. And then at the end of that process, 5 sessions or 8 sessions or whatever it is, I loved working with you. What have you gotten out of it? This is a key question. What have you gotten out of this process? And they can tell you all these things. And you say, that sounds really valuable. And they agree, it's super valuable. Write it down for sure. And then say, if you want to continue, we can discuss that and we can talk about a financial arrangement for that.
Yeah, I like that. If you look at my book, Triggers, 27 major CEOs endorsed that book. 27 advertisements for me. And, to me, your clients, if you do a good job, they should be more than happy to kind of help you out. I got another good question here. Someone from Germany, how do I really find great people from other countries? It is a very America biased, or at least a Western biased field right now. I would say one thing is go to my LinkedIn, sign up to be a LinkedIn follower, get on my LinkedIn feed. We're doing a program right now for 60 of the top coaches in the world. And I'm going to feature all of them on LinkedIn. And they are from all around the world. They're going to be from Europe, from Asia, from Southeast Asia. We have one Saudi Arabian woman.
Amazing.
Nice.
Very good, very big diversity here. So
she can even drive to you now.
She can drive. And so, it's very important, I think, to get to know these people. And some of these people from different countries, to me, that's the way I always feel. It's an honor. Somebody reaches out to you and says, I respect what you're doing. I'd like to get to know you more. It's always a positive thing for me. So if you have somebody from France or Germany and you're from that country, or we have Thailand, Malaysia, China, a lot of different, Japan, a lot of different places, what's the worst that can happen? They just say no. I find most coaches, for whatever reason, I've never quite understood this. I think most coaches are very nice people. I know.
It's not bad.
Why? It's not a bad thing. I've never quite understood why. Most psychiatrists don't find it to be that particularly nice. So I don't think it's a factor of being in a helping profession. But for whatever reason, I think most coaches tend to be very nice people, very helpful people. And Yeah, you can't win them all. I mean, every field has a few jerks. But most people, I think, if you reach out to them and you're warm and friendly and you say you respect them, you've read what they wrote, then you might be surprised how responsive they'll be.
Yeah, that's really terrific, Marshall. Thank you very much. And I just wanted to dive in with one quick thought about SP's question about the data clients. Just one other thing to add, SP, especially because you are giving people the gift of free services, it's really important. Make sure as much as possible that the people that you are serving for free mirror the population that you would ultimately like to be paying you. So if you want to be coaching lawyers, make sure that your practice clients are lawyers. Or if you want to be, mirroring, if you want to be a career coach, make sure that you're doing people who are doing career transitions, because that way the testimonials are going to be that much more salient and convincing. Every client wants to know, well, have you worked with people like me?
Right.
And so this is a way to be able to do that. So guys, these are great questions. We're just, FYI, we're coming up, sort of the denouement. We've got about 10 minutes left here. And so I just want to take this opportunity before, folks may need to begin to drop off, to let you know about a couple of other upcoming professional development opportunities for you. So one exciting thing, if you liked this session, guess what? We're going to do another one.
Amazing.
Yes, on October 22nd, Alisa and Marshall and I are going to be back. We are going to be doing another Q&A session very much like this. This one is going to be aimed at people who are already established coaches, but you know what? If you're a new coach, you're invited too. That's okay. The questions may be a little bit different in terms of people who are dealing with slightly different questions in their practice, but good to prepare now. Why not? So just for those who are on live, if we're emailing this link to you afterwards, I'll include this in the message. But for those who are on live, forgive me as I lean forward here, I actually have the link. So if you want, you can register right now. I'm going to send this to you. We'll just take care of this here. This is the link to the October 22nd webinar with Dorie, Alisa, and Marshall. You can register right here. So hope you like it. And one other thing that I will mention, I'm actually doing this one solo, but in case you guys are interested, next week there is going to be, again, a free webinar, and it is about how to become a recognized expert in your business. And you can register for that. That is the 18th of September, and you can register for that there. So the links are in the chat box. So thank you very much for that. And so a question came through that I think is useful about how to develop your speaking business. How do you get speaking engagements? And I know this is something that all of us have spent time doing. Certainly you can get business leads out of it. So what do you guys think? Marshall, what's your take on speaking and how it is for a practice and how one might begin to develop that?
I love it. I mean, I enjoy speaking more than coaching. Coaching is where I learn everything. I love coaching because I learn so much. I learn more from them than they learn from me. Speaking, I enjoy it because it's fun. I just like get up, show off, have fun, have a good time, and get paid a lot. Get paid a lot and it's fun. And so I would say, the first question of speaking, do you love doing it? That's number one. I just gave a talk in Russia, 20,000 people. So I thought, maybe actually I might get nervous. I never really get nervous, but I thought maybe I get nervous. I only had one thought the whole time: be happy, have fun. People loved it. Again, my next program in Russia, how many people are going to be in the audience? Live? 50,000.
Amazing.
They love you in Russia. Almost all of Russia.
50,000. And
right.
why not? Just get up there and have fun. Just enjoy yourself. And, if you're not having fun, they're not having fun. So I would just say, if you love it, it's great. And conversely, if you don't like speaking, you may want to choose another path, because it either works or doesn't. And you either kind of love it or don't. And if you love it, it's great. And if you want to learn to get better at it, which a lot of people do, they have things like Toastmasters and other things that I think are wonderful. Low cost, low risk opportunity to just get up and practice.
Can I key off of that? Because Marshall, it's so true. I mean, you are an amazing speaker, and the crowd with you is the more the merrier. I guess I would say when I got started in my speaking career, and this is 18 years ago, I was terrified and I did not love it. Okay, and I did not love it because I was terrified and afraid I wasn't very good at it. So what I did? Practice. A growth mindset is powerful here, and I have to thank my friend Diane Danielson, who told me when I was back in Boston, You're going to speak for Downtown Women's Club on May 22nd. Be there. And I was like, oh, I'm so scared. And so I got through it, and I got through it again. And last year I was named one of the top 100 excellent leadership speakers by Inc. magazine.
Yay.
And from there to here, all three of us were actually, from there to here is extraordinary. So practice will get you there. And I think it's really important to think about whether, if you're terrified by it, try it a few times and see if you can get comfortable. Yeah. And then you might get better at it. And the last thing I just want to say is that it's very powerful to learn to be a public speaker. It helps your whole business.
Hi, Josh. There's a friend of ours up there, Josh.
Yes, so many good friends that we're seeing popping up into the chats and the comments. That's wonderful. Yes. And so just to wrap up the commentary on speaking as well, I actually have a whole chapter on building a speaking business in my newest book, Entrepreneurial You. And one of the things that I talk about is sort of the progression in terms of building your public speaking. It is amazing to get, if you like speaking, to get paid for speaking. And so it's, unfortunately, it takes a while, right? So early on, I think all of us have done a lot of unpaid speaking. And you sort of start there and you work your way up.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, the good news is that when you are willing to speak for free, you can basically pitch anyone. You can be like, hey, I'd love to speak.
On any topic.
Any topic. And they will often be very excited to have you.
Yeah.
The trick is the transition between being an unpaid speaker and being a paid speaker. And it is it's not impossible, but it's almost impossible to actively pitch yourself and then get paid for it. Because oftentimes the people who are booking speakers want to feel like they're choosing you. It's like you sort of make yourself look like a commodity when you're like, please pick me. And so ultimately this is where building your brand, building your platform and your social proof comes in. The number one thing that was helpful to me in terms of building a paid speaking practice was publishing my books and writing for high profile publications, because it gave people a way to discover me and then reach out and say, oh, this is interesting. We'd like you to speak on this or that. So that's great. And I will say, we have just a couple of minutes left, guys. This has been an amazing session. Thank you so much. And again, we hope to have you back at our next group session on October 22nd. We have the registration link in the chat box, and I hope to see you, if you'd like, on the September 18th webinar about becoming a recognized expert. So the last question that we will have is actually about referrals, and so it's how do you get more referrals? Do you have thoughts about referral fees, and what's a way to sort of get the referral mechanism going more effectively? Alisa, I know this is something you've thought about.
Well, I've thought a lot about that. I mean, I have to say that as you get excellent results with your clients, you get a lot of referrals, and that's very powerful and very validating. And then over time, it's really helpful to have a cohort of folks that you can refer people to, because that really helps you build even your credibility by having a strong network and a strong bench and a community of people. So, but I would say the most important thing is doing excellent work and having your clients recognize that, and them also being people who are comfortable referring you.
Yeah, I think that's terrific. I'll also say it is definitely very useful to think about the niche that you occupy and then be clear on the ones that you don't occupy. So for instance, a lot of times people will come to me and they'll say, well, I want career coaching because I don't know what career I should have. And that's certainly, people can benefit from coaching around that, but that's not what I do. And so I know other people who are career coaches, and I can send it to them. And similarly, you set up referral networks so that you can begin to get business and just know, oh, good, I'm entrusting you to a person who's going to be good, you're going to get good results, and they feel safe referring back to you. Marshall, do you have thoughts about that?
That's great.
Wonderful. Well, any parting words, Marshall? What is your number one piece of advice to a new coach?
Parting words for me are more personal. I am now beyond 70, and my mission in life is to give back. I've been very fortunate, very blessed in my life, so I want to give back as much as I can in the time I have left to do it. Many people have been very nice to me. My email address, Marshall with 2 L's at marshallgoldsmith.com. Send me an email if you ever want anything from me. All my materials online. You may copy, share, download, duplicate, use in church, charity, business. Use any of my stuff any way you want to use it. So anything I can do to help you have a little better life would make me a very happy person. So Thank you very much. I hope this webinar has been helpful, and I always feel good. Maybe if you can help people like you or coaches, they help a lot of other people. So thank you.
That's wonderful, Marshall.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Anything else, Alisa, that you want to mention?
Just gratitude. Marshall, I met you 15 years ago in San Diego, and it changed my life and changed my career. You've been such an incredible mentor to me. Dorie Clark, I met you 10 years ago, and you've been such an incredible mentor to me also. And so just to be part of this beautiful community is amazing. So thank you both for your friendship.
That's great. And everyone, thank you for joining us. We are so pleased to have the opportunity. I know from my own work and experience that often the business aspects, the money aspects of building a coaching practice are still a little taboo, that people don't talk about it. And I feel like it is a big problem, because if we really want to be successful, if we want to thrive, if we want to be able to have the tools at our disposal to do what we are called to do and help other people, we have to start talking about that honestly and have a conversation where we can share tips and techniques and strategies and really be able to raise everyone's game. So thank you to Marshall. Thank you to Alisa for being here. And thanks to all of you guys. We will send out a recording so you guys can have access to it, and take care.
Bye.